Hey everyone! What I'll be doing in this video is going through the day 3 math work that you did last week. Just like my video on telling time, you can use this video to go through, check the work that you've already done and make sure that it's right. Or you can just listen and follow along and learn a little bit more about elapsed time. So, elapsed time. Elapsed time and time intervals are the same thing. We're trying to find how much time has passed between two different things. When we do elapsed time, there's different strategies that we can use. I'm going to show you several different strategies for each problem, and it just depends on how your brain works and what makes sense to you when you decide which one that you want to use to solve your problems. So, let's start by opening our pages to page 665. This is where we're going to be working with first. They say at the top of the page, a time interval is the amount of time that passes from the start of an activity to the end of an activity, which is what we talked about. So take a look at number 1. This one makes me smile because I have a brother named Evan, so this reminds me of my family. Evan's mother put biscuits in the oven at 5:10 p.m. She took them out of the oven at 5:27 p.m. How much time passed from the time she put the biscuits in the oven to the time that she took them out? So we're trying to find how much time were the biscuits in the oven. It's a pretty important thing to pay attention to. We're finding the time interval from 5:10 to 5:27. Look at that big blue number 1 that they have there. The first thing we always want to do, find the start time. The time that they started was 5:10 p.m. It tells us that right in the problem. The second thing we want to do, find the end time. The end time is 5:27 p.m. Also, it tells us that right in the problem. So now the next thing we want to do is use different strategies to solve this problem. The first one I'm going to show you is what they have here for step 3, count by 5s. And to help me do this, I'm going to use my clock. And I hope that you're using your little mini clock as well. They're very, very useful. Let me set my clock to the beginning start time. 5:10. There we go. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to put a little mark where my end time is at. My end time is 5:27. Here's 5:25, 5:26, 5:27. Going to put a little mark there. It'll erase off if you have a marker. So if you want to do this on your clock, that's totally fine. Okay, it tells us that we should skip count by 5s until we can't do it anymore. So that means if we're going to skip over our end time, we obviously can't skip count anymore. Let's count by 5s. Ready? 5, 10, 15. Can I skip count again? No, that'll make me be over my end time. So right now we're at 15. What I have to do for the rest of it is count by 1s. So I have 15 minutes, now I have 16 minutes, now I have 17 minutes, and I ended on my end time. 17 minutes passed from when we put the biscuits in the oven to when we took them out. That's one strategy that you can use. Another strategy that you can use, still using our clock, is what they have listed for number 4, counting just by 1s. Now, this strategy would take a long time, especially as we get into elapsed time that is more than 1 hour. But just to show you that you can do it, here's my clock, starting at 5:10. I'm going to count very carefully, minute by minute, until I reach my end time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. We still get the same answer even though we used a different strategy. I'm going to pause the video and then I'm going to show you the last strategy here on my whiteboard. All right, everyone, you can see that I have my whiteboard here. For showing you this last strategy, I'm going to show you directly on my whiteboard as I solve it, just because it's easiest for you to follow along this way. If you don't have a whiteboard, you could be using sharp pencil and paper. They modeled this strategy for you in that step 4 of the problem we're doing together on page 665. I want to show you what it looks like in real time. So, we know that our start time is 5:10. We know that our end time is 5:27. Notice how I have a number line here that I'm going to connect by skip counting. So the first thing I'm going to do, draw my line, perfect. I'm going to skip count by 5-minute intervals, just like I did on my clock. So I'm going to skip count from 5:10 plus 5 to 5:15. Am I to my end yet? Not quite. So I'm going to skip count by 5 again to 5:20. Am I to the end yet? Not quite. I'm going to skip count again by 5 to 5:25. Now, I am almost to 5:27. Do I need to count by 5 again? No. This time I can just skip count by ones. 5:25 plus 1, 5:26 plus 1 more to 5:27. Now, to find the total amount of time that elapsed, I have to add up all of these bunny hops that I did. 5 plus 5 plus 5 is 15, 16, and 17. 17 minutes. All right, hopefully showing you those different strategies was helpful. I'm not going to do every single strategy for every single problem. Number 1, that would take a long time. And number 2, you don't need to use every strategy. You need to use the one that you think is going to help you solve the problems the best. It's time for us to move on to the next practice problem. So we're going to be on page 666 and we're looking at example 2. Follow along as I read it to you. The clock shows the time that June's choir practice ended in the afternoon. If it was 135 minutes long, what time did it start? That's a good question. Usually when we talk about minutes, we don't usually go over 60 minutes. Now, why is that? Why do we say that 60 minutes is the cutoff when we talk about time? It's because there's 60 minutes in 1 hour. So here they're talking about 135 minutes. That's not super helpful to us because we don't know how many hours that is. The first thing that we want to do here is change that 135 minutes into time that makes sense for us, into hours and minutes that we know. So we start with 135 minutes. If I subtract the 60 minutes from that, I can change that 60 minutes into 1 hour. One hour, or 60 minutes, has gone by, and now we still have 75 minutes left to handle. Can I subtract another 60 from 75? Yes, I can. All right, what I've written here is changing that 135 minutes, a number that doesn't make a lot of sense to us, into something that does make sense. We subtracted 60 minutes 2 different times. So we have 1 hour, 2 hours, and our leftover, which is 15 minutes. That's how much time June's choir was practicing. So we need to know when her practice ended. And we look at that digital clock and it tells us that it ended at 3:15. So we want to find out what time it started. We're going to be working backwards, which kind of sounds like an interesting and silly strategy, but it's actually not too tough if you keep practicing it. So you should have filled out under that timeline. The time interval for choir practice was 135 minutes or 2 hours. Whoa, that was just ice falling out of my refrigerator. Or 2 hours and 15 minutes. Okay. Let's use these 2 hours and 15 minutes. And what we're going to do is we are going to subtract backwards from 3:15. I'm going to show you how I would do it on my whiteboard. If you are more comfortable subtracting the time on your analog clock, that is fine. Okay. For me, it's helpful to know I'm starting at 3:15 and I want to subtract 1 hour from that. I know in my head, if I go backwards 1 hour, I get to 2:15. That is 1 hour. I still need to go back another hour and 15 minutes. So I'm starting with 2:15. I'm going back 1 hour. That'll give me 1:15. That's my second hour. I still need to go back 15 more minutes. I start with 1:15. I go back 15 more minutes. June's choir practice started at 1 o'clock. Notice, 1 hour, 2 hours, 15 minutes. If we add all that time up, it equals 135 minutes. I hope that when you are solving these problems, you're using either paper and pencil or your clock to help you. It's really hard to do this work using mental math. I do not suggest that you just try to do it in your brain. Let's look at guided practice number 1 together. It wants us to find the time interval of a movie. I hope that you've had a chance to watch a movie during this remote learning time. I watched one last weekend and it was a lot of fun. Find the time interval of a movie. Use the number line. So they've given us a number line here that they want us to use. It's going to help us. Let's find our start time and our end time. Reading that clock, I noticed that the hour hand is pointed at the 3 and the minute hand is pointed at the 1, which means that it's 5 minutes past 3 o'clock or 3:05. I noticed that the end time, the hour is between the 4 and the 5, so it's during the 4 o'clock hour, and my minute hand is pointing to the 7, which if I skip count, I know is 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35 minutes after the hour, or 4:35. Excellent. So, notice how we have our start time and our end time. They want us to use the timeline and use bunny hops to find the amount of time that elapsed. I think that's a great idea. Notice the first jump that they made is going from 3:05 to 4:05. How much time has passed there? 1 hour, right? Now we're at 4:05. Can we count forward by an hour again? Does it go into the 5 o'clock hour? No, we want to stop at 4:35. All right, what we're going to do now is we are going to skip count by 5s, starting at 4:05 until we stop at 4:35. Count with me. 4:05, 4:10, 4:15, 4:20, 25, 30, 35. Let's do it on the clock to make sure we get it. All right, starting at 4:05, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 minutes. There are 30 minutes that pass between 4:05 and 4:35. If we add those together, we know that, as I have written on our page, 60 minutes plus 30 minutes, which is what we have here, that's 90 minutes of elapsed time, or in easier terms, we would say 1 hour and 30 minutes. Folks, the biggest suggestion I have for you when you're solving these elapsed time problems is going very slowly, going step by step through your work. Step by step. It doesn't matter to me if you use the timelines to help you solve, if you use your analog clock to help you solve, or if you use a combination of both like I do. All that matters to me is you getting the right answer. So you should have done your work on pages 667, 668. Question number 11 on 668 was tricky. It said, how can I determine the duration of time intervals in hours? What that's asking you is, how can I skip count forward by hours? Well, what you say is you see how many minutes have passed, and if it's 60 or more, you change that 60 minutes into 1 hour. It just wants you to remember that 60 minutes is the same as 1 hour. And when we're trying to find elapsed time, we sometimes need to switch between 60 minutes and 1 hour. We need to know that both of those mean 1 hour. You moved on to pages 669 and 670. A lot of these problems were the same as the ones that we just did together. I hope that this was helpful for you in clearing up some confusion and how to solve these problems. As always, if you have questions, have your adult email me. I know that you worked really hard on this. And if you're feeling a little frustrated or you're feeling like, this was hard, let me tell you 2 really reassuring things. The first thing is we use time in our daily life all the time. Your family uses time, I use time, and you're going to continue to have practice with it as you get older. Just by living more life, you're going to get better at telling time and telling elapsed time. The other really encouraging thing is that you will do time again in 4th grade, in 5th grade. As you get older, you're going to review this topic. So it's not like this is your only chance ever to learn time. I do want you to work hard and try your best, but if you feel really frustrated, like it was hard for you to get these answers, it's okay. You'll have time to practice it in the future. Keep working hard. Go Dolphins.